Hello everyone, and welcome to Muse Lessons. Today we have Gandalf visiting, and we're going to talk about the Ramayana. Hello, Daniel, Alexis, Cyan, Leon, Kazune, Dawn, Schneiderline, Natasha, Jeff, Lobso, Mary. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to do some Muse lessons with Indian kind of Hindu myth called the Ramayana. I hesitate entirely to call it Hindu because it's also kind of general, well, it is a Hindu myth, but it is also general Indian history. This is one of the most popular story, probably the most popular story in India today. It is kind of in the epic hero quest kind of genre that we would recognize as being like the Odysseus, those kind of figures. Rama is the main character. He's the guy on the front, the blue guy. And he is a prince that is sent into exile and has these adventures and eventually comes back to reclaim his crown. It is a lovely story, and this is actually just the summary of the story. This is not a one-to-one translation of the story, and it's that big. To understand the Ramayana, what you have to understand it is both a hero story about a human man, and it is a legend about the gods, in the sense that the man, Rama, is considered the incarnation of the god Vishnu. Vishnu is, in many ways, the most important of the Hindu gods. Hinduism is a polytheistic tradition, but certain gods have elevated roles, and Vishnu is basically the one that's been given the highest role. Vishnu is the embodiment of protection. There is a trio of gods, Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu, who represent creation and destruction and kind of just the existence of the universe. Shiva destroys, Vishnu protects, and the cycle that the universe goes through is based on the three of them. Vishnu is the one whose very essence powers the universe. Everything comes from Vishnu. If Vishnu dies, we're all gone, So, in this story, Rama is not just a human man. Rama is the divine, is the most holy creation. The most Western idea would be as if God descended. Not even necessarily like Jesus, because Jesus is the son of God, but like if the dude was down here. That's Rama. The reason for this is a terrible demon called Ravana, who is just messing up everything, doing lots of terrible stuff, and the other gods come to Vishnu and say, hey, stuff's bad. This guy Ravana is really messing with some stuff, but he's been protected against the gods. He has this protection that we can't stop him. And so Vishnu says, well, he doesn't have any protection from humans, so I'm going to descend and be born as a human and will fulfill this prophecy and defeat him. Now, the struggle, the main conflict of the story really comes from the fact that when he's born as Rama, he does not really remember being a god. There are points, I think, where this kind of varies, and of course different people tell it different ways, but he's a person, and he makes mistakes, and he has, different struggles he has to go through, even though he is the divine source. Got this one from the dude. Yes, this is one of the books I got for free, and I read through it entirely yesterday because it was fascinating. I loved it. I can see why it's so popular, because it's a lovely story. Obviously, being so old, much like the Greek myths, it falls into the traps of an older tradition, an older culture that had different ideas than we did. Modern India is, far more developed in terms of the caste system, which comes up some here, and more specifically in relation to this story, gender. The women really are just kind of wives, but it's still a really lovely love story, and I really enjoy it. And something that's really beautiful is, being a Eastern story, an Eastern tradition, it is far more open about emotion between male characters than the West would be. These male characters really love each other and are dedicated to each other in a way that a lot of Western stories would never allow them to so vocally show. Is he a demigod? Okay, he is what is called an avatara, which we would say in English is an avatar. Demigods are a different thing in Hinduism, but Hinduism has this tradition, especially for Vishnu, but other gods do it as well, where at certain times in history, the mortal realm needs the gods. And when it does, the gods will take on the form of an avatar, which essentially means they descend as a human being. They are greater than any human being. They have great, fantastic powers that they sometimes use at various points of the story, but they are in a human body. Vishnu has actually done this at least 9 times. He has 9 canonical incarnations, one of which is the Buddha. In Hindu tradition, Buddha was the incarnation of Vishnu. Rama is probably the most famous one. He was also Krishna in the Mahabharata, which is another very, very famous story in India. So they're not demigods. It's not like in Greece where there's all these people running around that are the half-god sons of all these people. It's not like that. He is the god, but in a human body. So, to get to the story, we are in a mythical ancient culture. Basically, in Indian tradition, this is the culture that came before modern India. It is so ancient. We really have no archaeological evidence for a lot of what happens in these ancient epics. The locations of them have been found, have been excavated, but there's really no, leftovers that we can find that prove that these things happened. Possibly either they were fictionalized, or maybe they were ancient events even by the reckoning of these people. Who knows? We will never know for sure. But in this ancient kingdom, it's a lovely paradise. I mean, this place is fantastic. Everybody's rich and well off, doing fabulously, and they're led by this really, really great king. His name is Dasaratha. Apologies, I'm learning how to say these names. Dasaratha is a really fantastic king. He is great. He has one problem. He doesn't have any children. And, of course, if you're a king, you kind of need to have some kids. So, he sets out, try to figure out what he's going to do about the lack of children. Let me flip over to this page. So he ends up finally, I believe, making sacrifice or asking his priests for help, and they pray, and finally he ends up having some kids. There are 3 wives, because polytheism was the normal polytheism. Polygamy was normal. He had 3 wives. Rama was born to the first wife and his eldest child. The next child was Lakshmana, who would become his best friend. And then there was Bharata, and Bharata had a brother who I guess really wasn't that important. But finally, he has some sons. He has 4 sons now. Rama's the oldest, and as he grows up, he is just awesome. He's so good at everything. He's so wise and kind. Shoo-in to be an amazing king. His people love him. His parents love him. Even his step-parents love him. There's no hatred in this family. They all love each other. There's no jealousy. There's no fighting over the throne. This is not an issue for them. They are so happy. So, as a kid, he's being raised to be king, be prince. He is prince, will be king one day, when a sage shows up named Viswamitra. He was a leader of his own at one point. He was a warrior who regretted his life choices, so he retired to become a monk, and now he fights demons. Demons are running all over the place right now. They are called Asuras, or Rakshasa. I've seen a couple different spellings, so I gotta look that one up. But basically, in this time, even though this particular country has a great setup, they're doing great, there are a lot of demons running around in the world that humans are being eaten by. They're not having a great time. So there are these sages who are trying to fight them, and Vishwamitra is one of them. He shows up at Dasaratha's kingdom and says, hey, I want your son, Rama, to come with me and help fight some demons. And the king is devastated. He's like, that's my boy. He's my baby. I don't want him to fight demons. I don't want him to get hurt. And, unfortunately, unfortunately for him, his son is going to grow up and be, an amazing badass hero, so he can't stay home. He has to go out on the adventure. And so eventually he is convinced to allow his son to go, and only asks that Rama's brother, Lakshmana, gets to go with him because they're besties, and of course the sage agrees. So the 3 of them set out on an adventure. And as they travel, the sage will often stop and say, "Let me tell you the tale of this place." And so the story includes a lot of smaller stories of other events that were probably, I would assume, like folklore that kind of got adapted into it, locals' tales. So they travel and they fight some demons. Specifically, the big fight that's going to happen next is against a demon named Tataka. She is a yaksha. Originally, she was a demigod, but she and her husband and her sons were very destructive and violent, and nobody liked that, so they were cursed and turned into demons. They would run around and eat people and tear up forests, and they turned this whole beautiful land into a big desert, and that is the desert that our heroes are currently traveling through. So their goal is to go find this demon that has done such terrible things and kill her. So they end up doing that, and it is no trouble for them. I mean, all the battles in this book, almost, until the very end, are literally just the demon shows up, and Rama is a badass and wins very easily every time. There's very little struggle. He fights with a bow. The bow is his greatest weapon. Whoops. I believe he uses all the weapons at one point. He's blessed with the gift of all weapons, but the bow is the one that's most especially associated with him. So they're continuing their journey. More little tales are getting told. They are even passing through a place that Vishnu, the god that Rama is there's a story they tell about what Vishnu did when he was there the first time, and it's very, very cool. It's about where this demon, Mahabali, had taken over the world. And it's another story of how Vishnu descended to defeat a demon. And Mahabali had defeated all these gods and all these people and taken over. And so Vishnu decides to descend as a human, and he approaches the demon as a monk. And he says, "I have come from afar after hearing of your greatness. My ambition in life has been to get a glimpse of one who is renowned alike for his valor and generosity." And he keeps kind of laying it on thick. Mahabali loves it. And he says, "Oh, great one, don't praise me, please. Is there anything I can give you? Anything?" He says, "I want nothing. I have no need for a gift other than your goodwill." But the demon keeps insisting, so he says, "Very well, give me a piece of land." Well, okay, whatever land you'd like. And he says, "How about no more than what would be measured in 3 strides of my feet?" Well, the demon thinks this is hilarious, so he agrees. And at that moment, the monk turns back into his godly form, and he transforms once again. Let's see where he goes. "The moment the water fell on his hand, the person, who was a figure of fun, even to his parents till then, assumed a majestic stature spanning the earth and the sky. With the first step, he measured the entire earth. With the second, he covered the heavens. No more space was left in the whole universe, and he asked Mahabali, 'Where shall I place the third step?' Mahabali, overawed, knelt, bowed, and said, 'Here on my head, if no other space is available.' Vishnu raised his foot, placed it on Mahabali's head, and pressed him down to the netherworld. 'You may stay there,' he said, and thus disposed of the tormentor of the worlds." That story is just lovely, and there's multiple layers here. One, I think 3-step or that phrase is going to be associated with Vishnu forever. That is kind of his tagline, Vishnu of the 3 steps or something to that effect. And this is a story being told by the sage is telling this story to Rama, who is Vishnu. The audience knows it. He doesn't know it. But there's all these kind of hints as we're going on that he is the ultimate god, and we're learning and seeing through some of the other stories of his greatness. And so we're thinking, oh, well, obviously Rama, if he is Vishnu, clearly he's going to go on and do some great things. So they continue their journey, and they tell another story about the Ganges River, which in Indian tradition is a holy river that was taken from the worlds above. The god Shiva kind of wrestled with it and brought it down to the world, and now it feeds the world with its waters. Because, I mean, in India, it passes through, like, everything, and everybody survives off it. So there's that story. And then finally, after telling these stories and traveling and defeating these demons, they arrive at Mithila City. They have another story here where he tells a story of a woman that gets turned to stone by her husband because of a god named Indra. Indra is infatuated with this woman and refuses to take no for an answer, and so turns into the woman's husband to trick her and have sex with her. In response, when the husband finds out, he curses Indra to be covered in genitals, specifically vaginas, as punishment. So he retreats to the void for a while because he's so embarrassed about being covered in vaginas. Eventually he is forgiven, and the vaginas turn into eyeballs. And this is meant to explain why he is Indra, the thousand-eyed god. That is another story they tell. And this is the moment, he says, the sage tells Rama, "You are born to restore righteousness and virtue to mankind and eliminate all evil." Because he had, of course, touched this stone that the woman had been turned into and saved her. She was changed back. And then she told the story of how she was tricked and she was cursed to stone. Because when Indra tricked her, she got cursed too. Again, hinting that the reason he descended from a god to a man, because he's trying to help everybody. His goal is to get rid of the demons and to set everything to rights, to essentially restore dharma, which is this sense of like the sort of the fate of the world, like the good and bad are in balance and everything's going to God's plan. That is the dharma. He is here to set everything to rights. So they show up at Mithila, and it's a beautiful, lovely place. And let's see here. They're walking through. It's a big, beautiful place. There's all this music and dancing happening. And they enter into the palace of Janaka, who is the king of this area. And Rama observed on a balcony Princess Sita playing with her companions. He stood arrested by her beauty, and she noticed him at the same moment. Their eyes met. They had been together not so long ago in Vaikuntha, their home in heaven, as Vishnu and his spouse, Lakshmi. But in their present incarnation, suffering the limitations of mortals, they looked at each other as strangers. Sita, decked in ornaments and flowers, in the midst of her attendants, flashed on his eyes like a streak of lightning. She paused to watch Rama slowly pass out of view, along with his sage master and brother. The moment he vanished, her mind became uncontrollably agitated. The eye had admitted a slender shaft of love, which had expanded and spread into her whole being. So, he's the incarnation of Rama, god of Vishnu, god of everything. Well, Sita, his love interest, is the incarnation of Lakshmi, who is his wife in heaven. So these two people who in the heavens were married and don't remember each other right now see each other and immediately, like soulmates, they know. And that whole night, both of them in the palace can't sleep. They feel ill. Rama can't stop thinking about her. She falls ill and like faints because they're both so upset and so stunned by this person they saw. Well, the next morning, they are introduced to the king, and the king immediately sees Rama and is like, "Damn, I wish I could make you marry my daughter," because everybody just sees Rama and loves him. And this has to do with the way that Hinduism sees gods. The idea of God in Hinduism, especially Vishnu, is this idea of all attractiveness. Like, if it is God, then you are going to immediately be attracted to God, because to know God is to love God and want God. So everyone that meets Rama loves him instantly, immediately. So Janaka immediately is like, "You have got to marry my daughter," except there's this one problem. So they explain where Sita came from. She is actually Janaka's adopted daughter. She was found as a child in a field and was brought in by the family. From a young age, she was so beautiful that people would not stop trying to make the king let them marry her. I mean, to the point that wars were waged. So he made a vow. The person that could marry his daughter was the person that could lift, bend, and string Shiva's bow. Shiva is one of the gods, god of destruction, and apparently had left behind a great weapon on Earth and had been left in Janaka's kingdom. It was a giant bow, and nobody could so much as lift it. So the promise was, hey, if you can do it, you can marry my kid, but nobody can do it. Well, of course, lucky enough, Rama, being a god, can easily lift it. In fact, they go on and bring the bow out, And everybody is watching and is like, oh man, that poor kid's gonna get his heart broken. Well, no, he doesn't. He lifts it easily, strings it. The sound of the bow being strung is so loud they can hear it in the next kingdom over. And immediately everybody's celebrating. Well, Sita finds out that someone has done the impossible. I'm gonna close that since Kitty's left. And is upset because she's afraid it's not the man that she saw, that she knows she wants to be with. She's, unfortunately, there's a lot of moments like this where the character is going to say, well, not just her, but there are other characters. There's this association with failure where they'll say stuff like, I will end my life. I will throw myself in a fire. It's definitely, on one hand, emphasis of their strong feelings, and also kind of emphasizing this sense of like the will of the universe. Like, if things aren't going to go this way, then it is better for me to die. But she finds out it is Rama, and she's thrilled, so they do get married. They have a lovely big wedding. It's a huge to-do. His family's invited, and he gets to see his dad again, and his brothers come. Everybody's happy. His brothers happen to find wives in the city, too, so that's convenient. And time passes. This is kind of the first part of the story. It's funny you say that Odysseus called someone ripped off his story. It is almost certainly the other way around. Because we know a lot of Indian stories and various Middle Eastern and kind of Eastern stories like that went to the Greek and the tales over there. Like, they took a lot of ideas from Sumeria, from India, from a little bit from Buddhist in like Gnosis and things like that. Like, there was a lot of trade happening at the time of the Greek myths, and it's very likely a lot of things kind of went from the east to the west. So, if there's a connection between Rama and Odysseus, it's probably Odysseus ripping off Rama. Alright, so, time has passed. They are grown up. Dasaratha has decided he's going to retire. He's the king. He's tired of being king. It's time to rest. So it's time for Rama to become king. He is excited to let his son take over. Unfortunately, a character named Kuni is going to cause some trouble. This is another kind of aspect of some of the older mythology, which has to do with associating... There's a lot of association in these stories that I've seen with disability and villainy. In this case, they deal with it a little differently. I haven't read the whole of the Mahabharata, so I don't know how that one handles it. But Kuni is a hunchback and is essentially partially disabled, if I remember correctly. She is a servant to one of the queens. Let me make sure I'm saying this one right again. Where's my page of pronunciation? Kikai. Kikai is the queen that she serves. And when she hears about what's happening with Rama, she comes to her queen and says, hey, shit's bad. Your son is not going to be king. And she's like, I know that. I love Rama. He's going to be so amazing and great as king, and I support him. But Kuni gets into her head, kind of says stuff like, listen, if this happens, your husband's going to retire. He could let you go, and, you know, you're not going to be important anymore. The queen, the mother of Rama, could push you aside. Like, you could lose everything if your son Bharata does not become king. And kind of works her up and gets her really worried. And she's like, you know what? You're right. I love this aspect of it because I feel like a Western story would have already just immediately assumed the queen character was jealous and wanted her son. And instead, they present this family that, like, they really do all love each other and support each other. And she wants Rama to be king until she starts to worry and starts to get into her own head and gets worked up about it. It's a very human thing, rather than just presenting her as a flat, evil, oh, I want my son to be king, you know, kind of thing. They show what makes her decide that. So, she approaches her husband and reminds him of a time earlier in their marriage when she saved his life, and in return, he promised her 2 promises, and she had never fulfilled them. So she says, listen, this is what I want. I want you to banish your son for 14 years, and I want you to make my son king. He is devastated by this. I mean, devastated. Like, so betrayed by the fact that she would do this to him, to their family, to her, the kid that she's helped raise. But she is just insistent. She has made this decision. This is what she's going to do. She's not going to stand down. And the king just kind of falls apart, falls into, like, a depression, and won't say anything. They summon Rama, and the king, still completely lost in this kind of fugue state, doesn't say anything, while the queen says to Rama, "The king has decided you are banished. You shall not be made king, and you shall go into the forest for 14 years. And Rama he says, "This is what my father wants. This is what I will do," and is very accepting of it. Lakshmana, his brother and best friend, is not. He's extremely angry, like, "What are you talking about? This has been your birthright. This is what we've been working for. How could she do this?" And Rama says, you have to let these things go. This is what happens sometimes, you gotta roll with it. It kind of this very sense of renunciation, which is this idea in Hinduism where you are entitled to work, but you are not entitled to the outcome of the work. Essentially, you can spend your whole life training to be king, but you're not entitled to become king because anything could happen. And you have to accept what happens and what moves on. And if this is what his father wants, he's going to do it. So he agrees. Everybody's devastated. The people, his family, his mom, everybody is so upset. And Rama seems to be the only one kind of taking it well. Like, you can tell he's not like, woo, but he's like, this is what needs to be happening. This is what's going to happen. I will do this for them. Unfortunately, when he leaves and his father kind of breaks out of it and realizes, oh no, he dies of heartbreak, unfortunately. His father passes away. Rama does not leave by himself. Lakshmana goes with him, and his wife, Sita, insists on going. When they're on their way out, Bharata, who is the son of the queen that did all this, comes home because he'd been away at his grandfather's, and he is so upset by this. And some people are kind of suspicious he was involved, but seeing his heartbreak and how upset he is, people turn around and they like him. But he swears he will only rule for... There's actually a very long section of, like, philosophical debate between him and Rama, where he tries to convince Rama to come back and rule, and Rama tries to convince him to go back and rule. And it's fascinating because both of these characters are like, you should be king. No, you should be king. Like, it's a very different kind of discussion that you don't see very often in fiction. And eventually Bharata agrees and says, fine, I will rule for 14 years. I will live outside the city. Give me your shoes. Your shoes will sit on the throne and await you. And I will be the regent in interim until you come back. If you come back a day late, like, I will burn myself in recompense, because he feels very guilty. From this point on, he will live very much like an ascetic to punish himself. But he says, I will rule until you return to rightfully take over. So Rama and his friend/brother Lakshmana and his wife Sita leave together to go live in the forest, and they make a little cabin in the woods in the middle of kind of demon territory, but I mean, they're badasses, so who cares? They'll be fine. And they travel and have kind of a little beautiful time together. They eventually make their little cabin in the woods and are chilling. It doesn't, I think, specify how much time has passed, but this is going to span like 14 years, so they are chilling there one night when a lady pops up. And she pops out when Rama's kind of in the front of the house doing his thing and says, hello, I am such and such's daughter from such and such. I am here to be your wife. And he's like, what? He tries to be very polite, but she is very insistent. Like, I'll marry you for this and I'll marry you. And he keeps coming up with like, oh, well, I'm of the such and such caste, so we couldn't marry for that reason. And she rebuts. He says, oh, I couldn't because of this. And she rebuts. And this goes on for a little while until eventually Sita shows up and is like, what's going on? And the lady becomes very angered at seeing Sita because she is so beautiful. So beautiful. The lady is mad. Rama realizes what the lady actually is. Her name is, let's see if it says where it says it. It doesn't say her name for a little bit. Oh, Surpanaka. She is a demon. and the sister of the great demon Ravana. She is so taken with Rama, so into him, and very upset that she's been turned down. So she leaves and spends the night really angry and mad, and the next day comes back to try and get Rama, thinking if she gets rid of Sita, then the way will be open and it'll be fine. So she attacks while Sita is alone. But luckily for Sita, Lakshmana is around the corner and sees what's going on and attacks Surpanaka and saves Sita. Specifically, he pulled out his sword and chopped off her nose, ears, and breasts, which sucks to be her. She is not happy about all this. She will complain about this multiple times to multiple people. Like, look what they did to me! And I just imagine her pointing like, look what they did! So they defeat her and eventually chase her off. She returns to her kingdom and to the other demons, not to Ravana. Ravana, her brother, is a little ways off. She goes back to her land and says, look what they did to me, we have to get them, and they raise an army. Let's see. So, Kara, one of Ravana's stepbrothers and the subordinate of Surpanaka, raises up these warriors and they go to fight. It is literally like a paragraph and a half explaining how Rama kicks the entire army's butt. The only one that escapes is Surpanaka, who at this point realizes she is doomed by herself and runs away to her brother. Now, Ravana is a really terrible figure. Hinduism sees the universe as being many, many, many worlds, embodied in some ways by the planets in the sky. Like there's, other than the earth, there's many, many, many heavens and other worlds and underworlds and things, and Ravana rules quite a few of them. He's even defeated most of the gods, and he's immune to a lot of powers and such that he cannot be destroyed. He has 10 heads. 10. He is incredibly terrifying and powerful, and his kingdom even has within it a lot of gods and sages kind of enslaved to him. The god of the wind, Vayu, and the god of death, Yama, are both in his kingdom against their will. There's a magic tree that he has put there to serve him. There's a musician. There's some famous sages. Basically, it's kind of showing all these grand figures from myth. He has subordinated them. That's how powerful this guy Ravana is. So Surpanaka, his sister, shows up and says, look at what's happened to me. This is terrible. And starts to complain to her brother, who at first is very angry. And then goes off and starts talking about how the husband of Sita, the wife of Rama, Sita, is so beautiful and keeps extolling her beauty to the point that Ravana's starting to get interested. Like, she sounds pretty nice. And this is all part of Surpanaka's plan because she figures if her brother kidnaps Sita, that leaves Rama all for her. What a great pair of siblings. What interests me most about religious history, without going on too much of a tangent, I really love stories and fantasy, and religions tend to have some of the most fascinating and beautiful stories around, and they really are just so fascinating to explore. I just really love the stories of them. So, Ravana decides he wants Sita. Now, behind the story that we're reading here, there's a lot of cultural context that you have to understand. Especially in this period. It's changed in the modern age. Like, India has been famous for the caste system, but it's changed. I don't know to what extent it's changed nowadays. But at this period, there was a very specific kind of way that you had to live according to what caste you were in. There were rules about how you were supposed to behave, what you were supposed to do that would influence, like, your position in the world, your karma, the way that the gods treat you. Like, it's a big thing. And Ravana, a demon, is also part of this system. He is supposed to behave in certain ways and do things certain ways, and he is not going to obey those rules because of Sita, because he wants her so much. And it will be the big undoing of him is the fact that he goes against these rules. So essentially, even this demon is bound by the rules of God, who has created the universe to exist in this system. Like, he has created the caste and the karma and everything. So the rules of God say everyone lives this certain way, and if you don't, you're in trouble. And that's what's going to happen to him. Instead of being like a big bad warrior, like the warrior caste, and going up to Rama and saying, let's fight, and whoever wins gets Sita, he will kidnap Sita, which is not cool, according to warrior code. Alright, let's see here. So, Surpanaka goes to their uncle, Maricha. Maricha has already faced Rama before, because he was one of the demons that was fought by him in his childhood. He managed to barely escape, and his family did not. So he has been living as kind of an aesthetic himself ever since, trying to repent and escape Rama. Unfortunately for him, his family's going to come, and the bonds of family in some ways are going to be a big part of this story. So even though Maricha now feels like Rama's bad and he's going to beat us, because his family's the one that's asking, even though he doesn't want to face Rama, he will eventually agree to help. So Maricha is going to go and turn himself into a beautiful golden deer and appear in the forest around Rama's little hut. They will see the deer. Sita sees it and thinks, oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. Please catch it for me, Rama. And Rama is thrilled to do it because Sita is smiling and so happy, and goes and says, all right, I will go catch it. Where is it? Now Lakshmana, being the smartest person of the three, because he's not blinded by love, says, listen, it's a little weird that a golden deer just showed up in the woods, so maybe we should chill for a minute. But Sita's really upset because she thinks it's awesome, and she's like, it's gonna get away, go get the deer. And Rama's like, it's my wife, I want her to be happy, I want to get the deer. So, against Lakshmana's bitter judgment, Rama goes to chase after the deer for his wife, and Lakshmana stays behind to defend Sita. The chase goes on for a while before Rama realizes, wait a minute, this should not be this hard, and wait a second, that's a demon, and kills him with one blow of his arrow. Unfortunately, before that happens, Maricha uses his demonic powers to pretend to kind of throw his voice and say, oh, help me, Sita, it's me, Rama, I'm being hurt, oh no. Well, unfortunately, Sita hears that and is really upset, and it looks at Lakshmana and is like, please, go help Rama. And Lakshmana's like, Rama is not gonna get hurt. At this point, he has seen enough and been around enough to know that Rama, his brother, is more than mortal. He is kind of a god, and is going to hint that here. Basically, he says, where is it here? You have apparently not understood the nature of Rama. There's no power which can reduce him to cry for help. If Rama was really threatened, the whole universe and all creation would have trembled and collapsed by now, for he is no ordinary mortal. Unfortunately, Sita is confused by this and is not realized their origin yet the way that Lakshmana has. He's also the incarnation of a god, but I don't remember the god's name. She does not remember all this, and she says, it's horrible that you won't even save your own brother. And so finally, Lakshmana is convinced to go and goes to try and save Rama. Unfortunately, that was a trap. And as soon as he leaves, Ravana appears disguised as a monk. And Sita does not think this is strange, unfortunately, and appears to say, oh, how can I help you? What's wrong with you, sir? And the monk immediately kind of starts being a little weird, saying stuff like, have you heard of this demon Ravana? He's pretty great and awesome and handsome and sexy and great, and you should dig him. And she's like, I don't think I do want to dig him. I don't think I like him. Well, it very, very quickly becomes revealed that this is actually a demon. There's a part here, the monk Ravana is describing himself. Kara, Virata, and the rest were weaklings, possessing neither bows nor armor, nor not a great task conquering them. Wait until you see, as you soon will, what happens to Rama when he has to meet the mighty Ravana, who has 20 shoulders. I love it. Remember, he does have 10 heads, which means he also has 20 shoulders, and apparently he's very proud of it. 20 shoulders. Well, Sita keeps throwing back at him and saying, what if he has 20 shoulders? I'm not interested. No. And that angers him, and eventually he transforms back into his normal form. Sita starts crying out for help. Unfortunately, he's not going to show up in time to help, but at this point, a plot device is revealed. There's quite a few of them, where Ravana has been suffering a curse. There's a few curses on him, but this one specifically is, if he touches any woman without her consent, he will be killed. So he can't force himself on Sita. He digs up the earth around her and picks it up and runs off with her. And she is desperately trying to escape and get away and convince him to turn around, and it's not working. And he is running off with her. A character that showed up briefly in an earlier story that I forgot to mention because he only shows up for a short time, shows up here again. Jatayu, who is an eagle and a friend of our young heroes when they were kids. He shows up and sees what's happening and tries to stop the demon and unfortunately is killed. With his dying breath, he tells Rama and Lakshmana who took Sita and unfortunately isn't able to tell them where he went. So now begins the second kind of portion of the story and the meat of it, the quest to find Sita. The 10 heads was supposed to be something along the lines of how he has different faces and not literally 10 heads, but as time passed it got exaggerated and the 10 heads became canon. Well, that seems to be also a trend of Indian stories where the emphasis on how great a godly character is put upon the fact that they have, like, you know, they're so great, they have so many limbs and things. Like, there's a part of the Bhagavad Gita, I think I'm saying it, where one of the god Vishnu in Krishna's form shows himself to his friend Arjuna and his limbs like grow and he has so much, like, it's kind of a way to emphasize how great they are as gods, to say, oh, well, they have, 8 limbs and 12 heads and all that. So that may also be part of it. But since he is a demon, I wouldn't be surprised that, saying a character is 2-faced or 10-faced, might be part of it as well. So, they start on their quest to try and find Sita, and they end up in the kingdom of the monkeys. The monkey kingdom is a kingdom of creatures who are descended from the gods. They are like furries. They are monkeys, but also like people, and they have their own kingdom. The greatest of them is Hanuman, who will be an assistant to the heroes at one point. But first, they travel to a mountain where they meet a character named Sugriva. Let me see if I'm saying that right. Where's your name, buddy? Sugriva. Yes. All right. So, they find out that Sugriva is trapped on this mountain because of past events. And once again, we're going to get a side story about another character. There. I'm going to sit right there. Are you going to chill, Gandhi? Yeah. And they tell the story of how Sugriva was the brother of the king of the monkeys and unfortunately was kind of framed for being overthrown. It's another issue of the inheritance of the kingship and battles between brothers. So kind of a way of mirroring what happened with Rama in some ways. So Sugriva's brother is Vali. Vali was the king. And he went off to chase down this demon and ran into this cave, and he did not come back for like 28 months, it says here. No news. So all the advisors of the Monkey King are like, Sugriva, you've got to be king, okay? This dude's been gone forever. He's not coming back. And Sugriva's like, he's my brother. He's going to come back. I'm going to go look for him. Well, wanting him to not run off, they sealed up the mouth of the cavern so that he couldn't go looking for his brother. Well, unfortunately, Vali emerges. He defeated the demon finally. He escapes the cave and forces his way through. And when he sees that he'd been basically sealed in, he thinks his brother Sugriva was trying to, ensure he died and take over the kingdom. Without even waiting for an explanation, he attacks Sugriva and they begin to wrestle and fight. Sugriva tries to explain, but his brother won't listen, and so he's forced to run away. Luckily, he's able to make it to this mountain that Vali is not allowed to touch because of a curse. There's a lot of curses. And so he's forced to stay on the mountain, or else his brother will come and kill him. And he didn't even do anything wrong. So Rama agrees to help Sugriva with this issue with his brother. They are preparing to go speak to the brother and say, hey, you know, your brother Sugriva wants to fight you. And Rama, of course, is secretly going to help. The valley, his, I'm probably not saying that right. I'm saying it like it's a valley. Let me make sure. Oh, no, it is. It's valley. Okay. So they agree to meet and fight. And they are fighting, and the wife of Vali says, hey, you shouldn't go. I've heard Rama's around, and he might, you know, kill you. And Vali says, you are so wrong. Rama is amazing and beautiful and handsome, and he would never kill me. I'm the rightful king. And gets very mad at her. And basically says that Rama is so amazingly righteous, he would never, you know, take a side between brothers. Well, he goes to the fight. They are fighting. Lakshmana and Rama are watching on the sidelines. And Sugriva is not doing well. Well, at the moment when Sugriva is about to be overwhelmed, Rama sends an arrow flying and pierces Vali's heart. Vali is shocked. He goes off on this tangent about, how could you do this, Rama? I'm the rightful king. My brother wronged me. You had no right to interfere in our fight. This is not behavior that is appropriate to a warrior or to a righteous man. How could you do this? This is horrible. Well, Rama steps forward and says, you know, you judged your brother wrong. He wanted to help you. He loved you. You wouldn't even let him explain. You would have killed him if he hadn't run to this mountain. I mean, you let your anger control you, and you were very, very bad and wrong, and the only way to stop you was to kill you. So, you know, I did what I had to do to save an innocent person. And kind of manages to convince Vali that he had been wrong and that he should not have wronged his brother, and the brothers are allowed to reconcile in their last moments as Vali passes away. But in having reconciled and accepted his wrongdoing, his soul gets to go to heaven. Does the Ramayana have Durga? I don't think so. The name is familiar, but I don't think Durga shows up. I could be wrong. So, after the death of this really kind of heroic king who did wrong, rainy season comes. So it's raining and typhooning so hard they can't go anywhere, they can't do anything. They build a shelter and they have to hide out for a while. The monkeys go back to their kingdom to put everything back in order and get Sugriva to be king, while Lakshmana and Rama are forced to wait. And Rama falls into a terrible depression. He's so upset that he hasn't been able to save Sita. He feels helpless. He doesn't know where she is. He feels like a failure. Like this very, very human portion of the story where he's forced to just wait and feel like he can't do anything. He's God. He created everything. But in this moment, he has this human helplessness. Well, the rains finally pass eventually. Sugriva and the monkeys had agreed to bring their army and come after the rainy season to help look. But the rainy season's gone and nobody's here. Well, Rama is starting to lose his temper. You know, he's been so upset and so depressed and so waiting to finally be able to go and search. And the people that promised to help him after he helped them, they aren't here. He is getting really upset. And so Lakshmana says, look, I will go see what's up. You know, breathe, count of 10, I'll go figure this out. Well, they show up and Sugriva is out of it. Like, he is with ladies and he is drunk and high and having such a good time, because, I mean, it's been the rainy season, they haven't been able to do anything, so he spent the whole time basically getting lit. Well, his advisors come in and are like, hey, buddy, you had a promise, and you're gonna get out of bed. Well, it's not really getting through to him. This is a cool moment where a female character steps up. Let's see if it says where it says she was. The character's name is Tara. I think she's like the mother-in-law. Council Tara. I can't see where it says who she was. She was related in some way by marriage, I believe. Here we go. Hanuman took and consulted him, took him to meet his mother, Tara. So I guess Hanuman is, maybe Tara is either Sugriva's mom or Hanuman's mom, but a mother figure. And she says, "You are being foolish. You have made a promise, and you are lazing about in bed, you fool. And now Lakshmana's coming, and he could destroy us all. Rama could destroy us all." So she gets her girls together, and they go out into the city, and when Lakshmana arrives, they kind of circle around him and are like, "Hello and welcome. We weren't expecting you. Please forgive our late arrival. Things have been crazy. Rainy season, a new kingship. We're getting things together. We're waiting right now for our army to gather, and then we are on our way. We promise." And she kind of manages to calm things down. Finally, Sugriva gets out of his kind of stupor, and he is so embarrassed. He swears, "I will never drink again. I am not going to do this stuff again." Kind of reinforcing, which there's actually a paragraph about this, some Hindu ideas about intoxicants. "I was drunk, and that made me forget my responsibilities and promises. Wine saps away one's energies, senses, judgment, and memory, and promises are lost sight of. One loses even the distinction between one's wife and mother. We are already born into a world of Maya, born in a state of complete self-delusion. We add to this state further illusions that wine creates. No salvation for us. We turn a deaf ear to the advice of wise men and the lessons they point out, and instead skim out the dirt and insects swimming in the fermented froth, quaff the drink and sink into oblivion. How can I face Lakshmana now? I hereby vow in the name of the most sacred Rama, I will never drink any intoxicant again." The term Maya is most commonly translated into English as illusion, but it's not necessarily illusion. Maya is this world. It's the world we live in physically. And we think that it's the real world. This is everything. This is reality. But actually, there's a spiritual realm that pervades this world and exists outside it and beyond it, which is even realer. It is the core of everything. It is real. This is Maya. This is kind of illusion. It's not everything. It's not the most important thing. But we get deluded and we think this physical world is the most important, more important than our soul or God. So let's just get drunk and high and party and have fun and value money and sex more than spirits and spirituality. That's kind of the idea behind what Maya is and what he's saying here. So finally they get the monkey army together. They go and they meet Rama, and everybody starts to spread out and look for Sita. There's a short kind of side quest where Hanuman and his group find an underground cave and a goddess that was sealed away in the underground, and they help her escape. And then they're really depressed because they still haven't found Sita, when suddenly, from above, a eagle descends. It turns out that the eagle is named Sampathi and was the brother of Jatayu, who'd been looking for him and didn't realize what had happened. The monkeys tell him what happened to his brother, and he tells the monkeys that he happened to see what happened to Sita. He saw the demon Ravana run off with Sita to an island called Lanka. So, Hanuman decides to go to the island. He is able to kind of spread himself. He has power. One of the others, let's see who tells him. He has great power because of his bloodline, I believe. I'm not entirely sure because this is the abridged version of the story. I think it doesn't cover everything. But essentially, he uses his magic abilities to get to the island and sneak around and figure out what's going on. He finds an island covered in overwhelming luxury and a lot of women because Ravana likes to collect women. And he looks and finds that Surpanaka is chilling there and is very much still obsessed with Rama. And eventually he finally finds Sita. Let's see. Here it is. She is tied up to a tree and surrounded by demon women who keep at least mentally abusing her, trying to make her really afraid. It doesn't really describe if she's being physically abused. she is very dirty and seems very afraid, but is still kind of like standing her ground. They watch, and Ravana appears and is like, hey, say the word and you can be my wife and it'll be awesome. And she keeps refusing him. Again, he's cursed. He cannot touch her without consent. So he's trying to terrorize her into giving consent, and she is still standing against him. Hanuman appears and says, hey, listen, your husband's nearby. He's close. We're coming to rescue you. It's going to be good soon. Here's a ring that he gave me to prove it. And she's like, oh my gosh, yes, thank you. I will wait patiently. I can make it through this. And Hanuman leaves. He decides as he's leaving to cause a little chaos, and he gets caught and brought to Ravana. And he takes the time to say, like, Rama is going to kick your butt. And Ravana is made mad by this. He wants to kill Hanuman. But one of his brothers, Vibhishana, intercedes, saying it would be improper to kill a messenger, going back to kind of like what's proper and improper as far as behavior goes in society. Don't kill the messenger. Well, he doesn't kill him, but he soaks his tail in oil and sets it on fire. Well, Hanuman escapes his bounds and runs around the island and catches everything on fire. So now there's more chaos. Eventually, Hanuman finally escapes, makes it back to Rama, and there's a short section here where Ravana takes counsel with his demon group and is like, well, what do we do now? The island's on fire. Oops, I made this fall. The island's on fire. There's an army out there. What's the plan? Well, you might be shocked to find his demon advisors aren't that thrilled with him. They're like, listen, you broke the rules. You kidnapped another man's wife. That is not cool. But I guess since you're our leader and you already did it, we gotta fight a war now. One of them specifically, the one that saved the monkey, Vibhishana, really would rather him not do this shit and doesn't like what he's doing. Ravana accuses him of being treasonous. Vibhishana says, listen, your family, I don't want to watch you lose everything. Like, what you're doing goes against the gods, and you're gonna lose, and it's bad. Rama's great, and you're not. And Ravana will not listen, unfortunately. So Vibhishana leaves. He does his best to make Ravana change his mind, and is not able to. So Vibhishana leaves and crosses the ocean and goes to Rama's camp and says, I surrender myself, I'm not on his side anymore, I want to help you out. After kind of testing him a little, Rama agrees, and he becomes one of their advisors and helps them figure out their plan. They are making plans to try and cross over the ocean to get to the island, and the ocean, of course, is an obstacle, and Rama's kind of pissed about it. He's like, ocean god, part the seas. And the ocean god's like, well, there's laws of nature, I can't just do that. And Rama's getting really angry, like, I will burn you to smithereens. Like, he is kind of, as we've seen in the last couple chapters, he's getting a little on edge. This perfect, beautiful god who's so kind and generous is falling prey to human foibles. Well, the ocean concedes and says, okay, listen, I can't part, but I will float whatever you want to float. And so they are able to kind of create a floating bridge out of whatever they can throw in it, and they throw all kinds of pieces of mud and rocks and mountains, all kinds of things, so that they can finally cross with the army across the ocean. So next is the siege of Lanka, which goes on for a bit. The army of Rama, which is mostly monkeys, has surrounded this kind of fortress, and Ravana is not doing well, and he's pissed about it. His people keep losing. They are just not able to do anything against these guys, and he is getting really mad about it. Other kind of figures, there's smaller battles within the battles, like Indrajit, who is the son of Ravana, shows up at one point. He throws these serpent darts at Lakshmana and Rama that makes them pass out. It makes them look like they're dead, and Sita's like, oh no, but it turns out they're not dead. There's, let's see here, a part where Kumbhakarna, who's like a really big badass god, who's been locked away because his hunger is so ravenous, he is set free to fight and is defeated by Rama after a great battle. And every time this happens, Ravana is like, how does this keep happening? Indrajit is eventually killed by Lakshmana, and Ravana is really upset by this. He even says at this point he'll kill Sita because he's so upset that this is what happened, and his advisors are like, she was the whole reason you did this! This is your fault! Stop! You know, and finally, eventually, we come to Rama and Ravana facing off, which, if you remember, in the beginning, Ravana is this great horrible demon who has upended the patterns of the universe, the will of the gods, and the gods made this plan for Vishnu to descend as Rama and kill him. So this is the climax where the universe is going to be put to rights because God is going to defeat the great evil. Ravana, his commanders and his people keep losing. He tries to go down and fight Rama, and it goes very badly, but Ravana is kind enough to Rama is kind enough to let Ravana kind of return and recoup and get back together and return. They both show up with chariots and charioteers. Ravana has his own, and Rama didn't have one. Indra, a god, sends down his chariot to Rama, along with Matali, who is his charioteer. They descend to help Rama. He's not sure if he can trust them at first, but then decides, oh, that this must be for real, and they have this great battle. I mean, these chariots fly across the sky and wheel around everywhere, and there's all these kind of weapons being thrown around, hundreds of arrows all at one time, and Rama just counters everything. He is so good and so powerful. He wins at everything. There is a portion where there's like a conch shell that he blows, which is associated with the god Vishnu. So there's this kind of feeling that like he's coming into his own as Vishnu, as God, fighting this demon. Let's see here. Ravana has a bunch of angry monologues where he's like, I'm the demon, I'm the king, I should win, and he's very angry that he keeps losing. The battle circles the entire globe, like they are flying across entire countries as this is happening, and Ravana keeps getting upset because everything he does is being countered. Eventually it turns into a magical battle where they are chanting mantras, essentially, if I'm understanding correctly. They have another word for it. Where'd it go? Let's see. Astras is what they call them, and I think the term is defined back here. An astra is a weapon, missile, or arrow powered by supernatural forces. So now they're fighting with magic. They keep throwing them back and forth at each other. At one point, he sends a really horrible one. Ravana sends one called Maya, which creates illusions. And he creates this illusion that all these people that have died are back now. And Rama is taken aback by it for a moment before Matali explains, these are illusions, it's not real, you know, you are more powerful than this. And Rama casts a spell back and sends it back. They keep casting these spells at each other. He has this magic triton that he sends at Rama, and everything just keeps getting sent back. So Ravana's starting to think, who is this? What god is this that this is happening? Is this perhaps the highest god? Who could he be? Not Shiva, for Shiva is my supporter. He could not be Brahma, who is four-faced. Could not be Vishnu, because of my immunity from the weapons of the whole Trinity. Perhaps the man is the primordial being, the cause behind the whole universe. I will not stop until I defeat and crush him. Sure, Jan. So they keep fighting. Ravana keeps getting very desperate and weakening and getting more afraid. He eventually literally faints. And Matali says, go finish him off, go. And Rama's like, it is not right to kill a man in a faint. I will wait until he recovers. And once again showing he's following the rules of the trade and Ravana's not. Eventually Ravana finally returns to his senses and desperately is throwing everything he can at Rama. And Rama eventually finally casts a thing called Brahmastra, I believe. A special weapon designed by the creator Brahma. And he throws it at Ravana's heart, which is the only piece of him that is vulnerable. And he is finally killed. And it is phrased in a way that I love. And this is the phrase that is used in multiple places in this book. When a character dies, the Brahmastra entered his heart and ended his career. ended his career. I don't know what that is translating, but multiple times the phrase ended his career is used to refer to killing someone, which is just the funniest sounding. Like, it sounds like a rap battle kind of thing. Like, he ended his career. That dude has got no job anymore. It's just over. I love it. Anyway, Ravana finally falls, but it's not really the end for him. He spent so long concentrated on Rama in this battle, thinking only of Rama, that in a way he purified himself. Because there's this concept in Hinduism of one way to purify yourself is to meditate on God first, just to focus and think of God, and by doing so you kind of will become, you know, one with God. If you die thinking of God, you will go to God. Like, there's this idea that focusing on God is part of the faith. And so by focusing on Rama for so long, he was able to purify some of the evil that was on him. And so when he falls, he has this kind of turn of heart once again, where he's like, I can't believe I did all this. I can't, you know, I'm so sorry for what evil I have done. And I am sorry for what has happened. And Rama and Vibhishana, the brother, approach. And Rama says, you know, give him the proper burial and allow him to be able to go to heaven. Afterward, Rama finally finds Sita. This is where it turns a little bit. I'm going to just read this whole section. After the death of Ravana, Rama sent Hanuman as his emissary to fetch Sita. Sita was overjoyed. She had been in a state of mourning all along, completely neglectful of her dress and appearance, and she immediately rose to go out and meet Rama as she was. But Hanuman explained that it was Rama's express wish that she should dress and decorate herself before coming to his presence. A large crowd pressed around Rama. When Sita eagerly arrived, after her months of loneliness and suffering, she was received by her husband in full view of a vast public. She felt awkward, but accepted this with resignation. But what she could not understand was why her lord seemed preoccupied and moody and cold. However, she prostrated herself at his feet, and then stood a little away from him, sensing some strange barrier between herself and him. Rama remained brooding for a while, and suddenly said, My task is done. I have now freed you. I have fulfilled my mission. All this effort has been not to attain personal satisfaction for you or me. It was to vindicate the honor of the Ikshvaku race, and to honor our ancestors' codes and values. After all this, I must tell you it is not customary to admit back to the normal married fold a woman who has resided all alone in a stranger's house. There can be no question of our living together again. I leave you free to go where you may please and to choose any place to live in. I do not restrict you in any manner. On hearing this, Sita broke down. My trials are not ended yet, she cried. I thought with your victory all our troubles were at an end. So be it. She beckoned to Lakshmana and ordered, Light a fire at once on this very spot. Lakshmana hesitated and looked at his brother, wondering whether he would countermand the order, but Rama seemed passive and acquiescent. Lakshmana, ever the most unquestioning deputy, gathered and got ready a roaring pyre within a short time. The entire crowd watched the proceedings, stunned by the turn of events. The flames rose to the height of a tree. Still Rama made no comment. He watched. Sita approached the fire, prostrated herself before it, and said, O Agni, great god of fire, be my witness. She jumped into the fire. From the heart of the flame rose the god of fire, bearing Sita, and presented her to Rama with words of blessing. Rama, now satisfied he had established his wife's integrity in the presence of the world, welcomed Sita back to his arms. The explanation that's given there is he was saving her reputation by showing in a public place that she was so pure that the god of fire saved her. Death by fire is a traditional way of suicide in various situations in their culture of, you know, the caste system that has specific rules for what you should do. That is part of it. And Rama kind of used it here as a tool to show her innocence. Now, this story has been adapted and changed thousands of different ways, and that scene is done differently in different times. The most popular version of it is this one, because it ends with a happy ending, with the two of them returning to their kingdom and having a great, fabulous coronation, a huge party. Everybody's so happy to see them. They are thrilled to be back together. They actually have to rush back home because the 14 years are almost over, and they don't want Bharata to kill himself in sorrow if they don't show up in time. And they are able to finally come back home and be happy and king and queen together. That is the version that most people really like, because obviously it's meant to be a happy romance story. Of course, it is baked into it, 2,000 something years old ideas of men and women and marriage and that kind of thing. But much like I think the Greek stories, which have baked into them a lot of problems, can be adapted in a modern sensibility, this story has so much value in it that I think it still speaks to the modern... It definitely speaks to the modern Indian. It's a very, very popular story. There was in the prologue here a tale of how there was an actual strike when an adaptation of this story that had been on TV didn't get extended for another season, and like a bunch of people did a strike, and the government paid for more of the show to be made, because that's how much this story matters to the people. And it can be interpreted in so many ways. There are really heavy religious aspects to it. There's, the heroic aspect. There's a lot of cultural stories, because there's sections where they go off on tangents to tell stories of other characters and places. And of course, it's so old, there's been so many different adaptations and versions of it. There's just so much to study and talk of here, and it has a lot of really beautiful scenes in it. And I mean, just the duality of exploring a character who is both God and man. I think Rama appeals to so many people for the same reason that Jesus does, because of the duality and the complexity that comes from being God and yet still being a powerless man who has these problems and these flaws. Like the big scene at the end with Sita is a big, how can God do something like that? Like, that's something that I think has been discussed a lot in literary and scholarly circles. The question of, why does the scene go that way? Why does God doubt his wife? And the explanation here, of course, is the far more romantic one. But there's other ways to look at the story, too. And before this whole scene, he had fallen into this huge depression and was getting angry and lashing out at people, and then finally he lashes out at her. I think there's a lot of interesting ways to look at it. I like the happy ending, of course, but it's a really lovely tale. The one my grandma told me as a bedtime story was the tragic ending. Oh no! The tragic ending involves her jumping into the fire, and I think she dies. But 2 children are born, so that the line goes on. Of course, they have to explain the family line. And Rama is so devastated by his mistake and realizing what he'd done wrong, he decides to ascend to heaven, and essentially he also dies to join her, realizing his mistake. I think there's something kind of pretty to that one, too, in a far more, philosophical way. This is a good story. But if you want to, explore the philosophy and the religious aspect of God and what it is to be human, there's something really fascinating about God making such a big mistake and then recognizing his wrong and, leaving this world to set it right. It's a lovely story. Thank you all for listening. I know it's been a weird week, but I'm trying to deal with personal stuff, and I'm getting there. I think we'll have fun Thursday when that new horror game comes out. That should be fun. If you like what I do and you want to support it, please consider donating or becoming a member. Links are in the description to do that. Thank you to all of our members here today, like Jeff, Daniel, Alexis. Who else did we have today? Schneiderline. I think Leon was here at some point. Thank you guys so much for your support. Y'all are what let me do this, and you're amazing. Thank you so much. Books are for sale. Still should finish, I think, the Silent Hill 2 one this week, but the other ones are still available in the store. Follow me on social media. Join the Discord if you'd like. We're going to watch some more TV soon. Of course there is a Bollywood adaptation of this story. I'd be surprised if there was not more than one. I really want to find one and see. I'd love to see how it's adapted into the modern day. So thank you all once again, and I will see you next time. Bye.